They called him Giant. Luke not only because he stood taller than any man in 3 counties, but because his silence carried more weight than most men's shouting. When he walked through the dusty auction yard that morning, the wooden planks groaned under his boots, and conversations faltered like candles in wind. Luke Hale had a face carved by sun and grief, broad shoulders shaped by years of ranch work, and eyes that had seen too much loss to be fooled by noise. He hadn't come to buy a woman. He hadn't come to buy anything at all. He was there because his foreman insisted. The town would seize his unused grazing land if he didn't make an appearance at the annual contract auction. So he stood in the back, arms crossed, jaw tight, waiting for the whole shameful spectacle to end. That was when they dragged her forward. She was thin, too thin for a woman of her age, dressed in a faded grey dress that had been mended more times than it had been washed. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, as if she feared it might fall out if she let it breathe. Someone shouted her name, Mara Quinn, and another man laughed cruelly. "That's the Barren one," a voice said loudly. 5 years married, no child. Dead husband, dead womb. The crowd laughed again, sharper this time, like stones hitting glass. Mara did not cry. She did not beg. She stood still, eyes fixed on the dirt, hands folded like she was already preparing herself for burial. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Widow, no children, no dowry. Hard worker, cooks, sews. Can't bear young. We start the bid at—" He paused, scanning the crowd, but no hands rose. Not one. The silence stretched, humiliating and cruel. Luke felt something twist in his chest, something old and familiar. He knew that silence. He had lived inside it since the day his wife and infant son were buried under the same white stone. "Fine," the auctioneer said, forcing a laugh. $1, anyone?" A man near the front spat on the ground. "She ain't worth the feed." Another said, "Buy her and you'll die alone." Laughter again. Luke's hand lifted before his mind could stop it. $1, he said. The yard went still. All heads turned toward the giant cowboy in the back. Luke stepped forward, each stride slow, deliberate. He met the auctioneer's stunned stare and placed a single silver coin on the table. "I'll take her." Mara looked up then, truly looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were dark, guarded, and deeply tired, but there was something else there too. Not hope, not yet, but curiosity. The crowd erupted into whispers. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. "He's mad," someone muttered. "Buying a barren woman for pity." Luke did not look at them. He simply turned to Mara and said, "You don't owe me anything. You'll have food, shelter, respect, that's all." She swallowed hard and nodded. The journey to Luke's ranch took 2 days. They rode in silence, broken only by the sound of hooves and wind across open land. Mara expected cruelty, orders, demands, but Luke offered none. He showed her the small guest cabin when they arrived and said, "You can leave if you want." "I won't stop you." She stayed. Weeks passed. Mara worked like a woman trying to disappear into usefulness, cooking, mending, cleaning, tending animals. Luke noticed everything but said little. He never touched her, never raised his voice. At night, Mara lay awake listening to the wind, wondering why a man like him had bought a woman like her. She expected payment to come due. It never did. One evening during a storm, the truth finally spilled out. Mara confessed everything. How her husband had blamed her for years, how doctors had called her empty, how the town had decided she was cursed. Luke listened, face unreadable. When she finished, he said only, "People like to name things they don't understand. Makes them feel taller." Something shifted then. Not love, not yet, but safety. Months later, something else shifted too, quietly, unexpectedly. When Mara realized she was with child, she thought it was a mistake. Then fear followed, sharp and choking. When she told Luke, her hands shook. He sat down heavily as if struck, then stood again and walked outside without a word. She cried alone that night, certain she had ruined everything. But the next morning, Luke returned with a carved cradle made from old oak. His hands trembled as he set it down. "I don't know how to be happy," he said, "but I want to learn." And that was only the beginning. If you're drawn into this story of dignity, patience, and unexpected miracles, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the most powerful chapters are still ahead. The day first child changed the ranch. But the second changed the legend. When Mara gave birth to a healthy son, word spread faster than prairie fire. The barren woman had borne a child. People whispered about curses breaking, about God's jokes, about giant Luke's silent strength. Luke held the baby like something sacred and fragile, as if one wrong breath might shatter the moment. He named the boy Samuel, after his own father, and for the first time in years, laughter returned to the ranch. Then came the second child, a daughter with Mara's dark eyes and Luke's stubborn chin. Then another, and another. 8 years passed like a river after winter thaw, fast, unstoppable, full of life. 7 children filled the ranch with noise, questions, scraped knees, and bedtime stories told by a giant father who pretended not to enjoy them but never missed a night. Mara grew stronger with each passing year, her body no longer defined by what it had once failed to do, but by everything it had accomplished. She laughed more. She stood taller. She was no longer invisible. The town, however, struggled to accept what it had done. The same men who had mocked her now tipped their hats. Women who once turned their backs now brought pies. The auctioneer avoided Luke's eyes whenever they crossed paths. One day Luke finally spoke. He stood in the town, square with Mara beside him, and all 7 children lined up like sparrows on a fence. "You named her Barren," he said calmly. "You named her worthless. You were wrong. Names don't make truth. Love does." No one argued. That night, as the children slept, Mara sat beside Luke on the porch. "You never asked for this," she said softly. "A woman like me, a life like this." Luke took her hand, rough and warm. "I didn't buy a woman," he said. "I chose a future." Mara leaned into him, finally at peace, not because she had proven anything, but because she had been loved without conditions. And so the legend lived on, not of a giant cowboy who bought a woman for $1, but of a man who saw worth where the world saw waste, and a woman who bloomed when someone finally believed in her. If this story moved you even a little, subscribe to the channel for more powerful Western legends, emotional journeys, and stories that remind us sometimes the greatest miracles begin with dignity, not destiny.